She works in possibility.
The challenge of trying to fit into this world and be something that I'm not.
Her identity for so long was in what she did.
You can't control what she's focusing on.
I always thought I was a fairly self-aware person, but man, was I wrong. I felt on top of the world. It's the second week of March, 2020. I'd been working for over a year on a new school show for school kids. The show came together and it was an incredible deep feeling of satisfaction. And the next day, on March the 12th, I went to our Opera Kelowna launch. We talked all about our first season. It was so exciting. And the next day, the province was shut down. I thought, what if I can never conduct again? I don't know who I am if I can't conduct again. I'm Rosemary Thompson, music director and conductor of the Okanagan Symphony Orchestra and artistic director of Opera Kelowna, and I have ADHD. My job is to study the score so that I have a picture of it that I can create in real time. It's hard to describe what happens and how it takes over. I mean, I've been making music my entire life, literally since I was a baby. My first memories are of singing. And there are all these technical elements of music, right? I need to make sure that I'm shaping the melody, and I need to make sure that I'm listening for the harmonies and that they're in tune in the chords, and I need to make sure that the rhythms are all together, and I need to make sure that the flow of the music and the form of the structure of the music that I've studied is actually being translated into this oral time frame that the audience is going to never, hopefully, think in an intellectual way, well, did that form really pace very well? But they're just going to feel the emotion of getting to that climactic moment and the denouement that happens after. They're going to feel the beauty of the harmonic progression that happens. They don't need to know why. That's our job. We just need to translate the beauty of it. Things had just gotten, I just wasn't functioning anymore. Everything was falling off my plate. I had too much going on. Menopause totally starts to change the game. And I was struggling. I'd put on an extra 40 pounds. My blood pressure was 200 over 120. And I had an amazing family doctor, and she just kept emailing me and saying, haven't seen you in a while, haven't seen you in a while. And I went in, and she said, so how are you doing? And I burst out crying. And I said, I think I have ADHD. And so she did the assessment right there and then. I started on medication the next day. And 2 days later, I sat at my computer for 4 hours and answered about 40 emails. And I remember thinking, is this what happens in neurotypical brains? Is this what people do? They just sit down and focus on this with no effort? It was extraordinary. The next day, I was telling a friend, and she said, so what do you notice about being on the medication? But I looked at her and I said, I'm not thinking about food 24 hours a day because I was seeking dopamine. And so now that I understand the chemical nature of it, it's a completely different way of living, And people don't know they have ADHD, and they struggle and struggle and struggle and struggle. And that's why I'm doing this documentary, because I want them to know it's so much better if you can get help for it.
I'm Dan Duncan, and I'm an ADHD coach, and people ask, what's an ADHD coach? And I kind of quip back at them, oh, an ADHD coach helps people have ADHD better, which is actually true, but sounds kind of an odd thing. So I have ADHD, and my method, the framework that I've developed is called ADHD Inside Out. And at first it was because I knew ADHD from the inside out. But it's also the method that I use, that in coaching you want to start with what's going on inside and work your way out to the symptoms instead of the opposite way around.
My name is Irene Spellacy. I'm a registered psychologist in Alberta and British Columbia, and I do not have ADHD. In terms of what's going on in the brain for people with ADHD, there's a few different factors that can contribute. There's a neurological piece where the signal isn't being sent in a consistent way, for example, to pay attention. There's a rhythmic way of sending that kind of signal to neurons and your brain receiving that information. And the rhythm is slower for people with ADHD, which sounds counterintuitive to what we see with a hyperactive person who seems like, oh, they've got so much energy and they're all over the place. But the truth is they aren't getting the message to pay attention in a regular rhythmic fashion. So they might only get it every 3 beats if we think of it like music. So it's pay attention. Pay attention. There's a lot of gaps in there. For somebody who doesn't have ADHD, it's a rhythm. Pay attention, pay attention, pay attention, and they don't miss any beats.
My name is Megan Williams, and I'm principal double bass of the Okanagan Symphony Orchestra, a friend of Rosemary Thompson's, and I do not have ADHD. It's hard for me to say where the ADHD starts and where Rosemary's personality starts, because I've just experienced them all together all the time. But from my understanding, some of what the orchestra would experience of her ADHD is like when we're trying to get an answer to a question or trying to get her attention about something that's maybe 2 or 3 months down the road, just because we have to plan with such long time horizons. That's not particularly interesting to her right now. And so it's that hyper focus that comes into play with ADHD. You can't kind of control what she's focusing on. So it has to be really sparkly and shiny and interesting in order to kind of take her attention away.
My name's Dan Shea. I'm Rosemary's husband. I'm a lawyer here in Kelowna, and I do not have ADHD. I like to be on time for things. Rose likes to be on time for things, but not to the same degree I do, I would say. At our wedding, there was a pool going between me and all my groomsmen about how late she was going to be. The estimates ranged from 15 minutes to 50 minutes, and I think she beat the highest estimate, if I remember correctly.
My hair wouldn't dry.
There was lots of good music, so we were all having a fun time just waiting for her to show up. She's, I don't know, that it's nothing intentional, it's nothing malicious, it's just the way that she is, where she has a certain way of thinking that she will get things done in a certain time, and being perpetually confounded by the results.
The symptoms for ADHD vary. There are 3 diagnostic categories. There's the inattentive subtype, there's the impulsive / hyperactive, which most people are more familiar with, and then there's the combined subtype. So within the diagnostic manual, there's a number of different symptoms that you have to have, but generally it's known in terms of inattentive things, spaces out easily, loses track of things, can't remember things being told. The impulsive and hyperactive would be has energy, always going, goes from one task to another very quickly, difficulty finishing things. It could include sleep disorders, relationship issues, difficulty with school, self-esteem, regulating physical activity as well as emotional activity.
There's different analogies, kind of different word pictures that we use to help people understand brain functions. for example, like executive functions. Impulsivity is an executive function. But impulsivity is not the urge to do something, it's the inability to put the brakes on when you have an urge. So we end up doing something before we had a chance to put the brakes on because the brakes are missing. So for impulsivity, we would use that word picture. The brakes failed, right? So it kind of makes it more real for people.
Rose has a tendency to do things last minute. And there are some funny stories. Like, she does pre-concert talks, and I think they're at 6:30, and the concert starts at 7. So I need to be there for 7 o'clock, but she needs to be there for 6:30. And, I'm driving to Vernon, and I feel like I'm late to get unpacked and warm up and do all that for a 7 o'clock show. And then I see Rose's, orange car come flying past us on the highway. And I'm thinking, wow, she's really cutting it close. I just can't believe that she's getting away with this again. But she always seems to just sneak in there right at the last minute. And then in this cloud of energy, she rolls in and does what she does with the audience and public, and they just love it.
Advocating for an understanding of what ADHD is and how it impacts an individual who has it, like me, is really important to me because so much of my value I had tied to my usefulness instead of just, I am valuable because I'm a human being. And I know it's tied to the ADHD because of all the judgment. The challenge of trying to fit into this world and be something that I'm not, and all the struggles that have happened because of it, and pretending that that's all okay, and just being, a people pleaser, and all these things. So I always thought I was a fairly self-aware person, but man, was I wrong. And when I met Coach Dan, I first had him coming to work with my son, and then my son wasn't able to be at this coaching that we had booked, and so I said, okay, well, why don't I take that coaching? Probably 10 minutes in, I went, oh my God. There's so much here that is going to help me. I mean, sometimes he's really annoying because he doesn't give me the answer for anything, but he asks some pretty great questions.
I remember one critical question. I said, at one point, I said, tell me again who you are. And she said, I'm a conductor. And I said, that's what you do, but who are you? It stopped her for a moment. She actually looked a little surprised and a little bit insulted because her identity for so long was in what she did. I'm not challenging that, but it's Rose who's getting through by conducting. That's how you influence people. That's how you bring people alive. Any interaction you're having, if you can start with who you want to be in that activity, then that's you pursuing success instead of trying to avoid failure. And so her being just awakens. And when you play to who you are, when you play to that being person, your brain will give you all the energy you need. You will not be called lazy or distracted. Your brain will come to attention because now your values, who you are, has found a way to get out, if I can put it that way, a way to interact with the world around you. And that's the richness, that's the advantage of ADHD. When you live in that sweet spot, now ADHD gives you the advantage. It's not a disadvantage anymore, it's your superpower.
My name is William McKenzie. I am a percussionist at the Okanagan Symphony Youth Orchestra, and I am currently a student at Okanagan College, and I have ADHD and ASD.
I'm Jennifer McKenzie. I'm a parent volunteer with the Okanagan Symphony Youth Orchestra, as well as I sit on the board of directors for the Okanagan Symphony Society. I do not have ADHD, as far as I know. Rosemary's commitment to keeping the OSYO going, getting it up and running last fall against many obstacles and barriers, nothing short of miraculous, quite honestly. She just sees the kids first. She sees how much stability, how much community, how much comfort being in our tribe of arts kids gives not just the kids, but the families as well.
Rosemary is literally the embodiment of music, if you can picture it as someone. It's very encouraging to know that someone like Rose, who is so popular, so successful, has a bit of a struggle like ADHD. So it's a bit of a confidence boost to me and other people who would probably be struggling with facts like that.
With Rose having an actual diagnosis now of ADHD, I think certain things make sense. When I've been volunteering and watching the whole process of the kids rehearsing and all the different pieces of the orchestra, she's very tuned in to just adapting to the different learning styles that are needed. She's not, this is not just one way kind of thing. So she may be speaking to this student playing this instrument, and it's amazing how she finds connections with all these kids and how she knows them and learns their names so quickly, but learns who they are. It makes a lot more sense to me now because I've always seen that. I've always noticed that. And yet it's like, how do you do that? Wow. She's adapted her whole life, hasn't she?
I grew up in St. Catharines, Ontario, right next to Niagara Falls. My parents met singing in a choir. My mom had come over from England. She was going to teach her way around the world, but then she met my dad and stayed in St. Catharines for the rest of her life. They were both amateur musicians. My dad was a chemical engineer and my mom was a teacher. I'm one of 7 kids. I always say I'm the poor deprived middle child just because it makes my 3 older sisters crazy when I say that. I didn't feel deprived in any way. And probably a good snapshot of the 7 of us and my parents is that we went everywhere in this big old station wagon, old being the key word. And because we didn't have a radio in the car, we sang. Everywhere we went, we sang. Even if it was just driving to the church choir rehearsal, we were still singing in the car on the way.
When ADHD isn't addressed in children, we do notice that they will have significant social difficulties, self-esteem problems, learning difficulties. They start to believe that they are lazy, that they don't enjoy what they're doing, that people don't like them. They have very sensitive emotional reactions to how other people treat them. They might have anxiety. So the social repercussions are usually the thing that I'm most motivated by when I talk to parents about getting tested, because long-term you start to build in some of that negative self-talk.
My older sisters would describe growing up with me as being very messy. No one really wanted to share a room with me because my stuff was all over the place all the time. I know that I was the one that was the most on the go all the time. At the time, I didn't know that I had ADHD. Now I can really understand what that was all about. But we also had one little tiny warped mirror in our one bathroom. And so when we were teenagers and we were all putting makeup on, we were always late to get in the car. My dad would be yelling up at us, "Stop your primping and get in the car." And so we were always jostling, I think, for position.
ADHD symptoms look like something they aren't. They look like bad character and poor choices. So when people respond to symptoms, assuming it's bad character and poor choices, their social responses towards the individual with ADHD are going to be tainted with shame and blame. Because shame is a commentary on your character. You shouldn't be that kind of person. And blame is a commentary on your choices. You're responsible for making poor choices, so change your way of operating. And that can't work.
In terms of how it impacts adults, we would see, again, relationship difficulties, high-risk activities, impulsive decision-making. There's a higher likelihood of addiction, depression, suicidality. So there's lots of that social-emotional repercussions. ADHD also has a lot of gifts within it as well, but people generally don't get treated for the things they're doing really well at.
It's interesting that my diagnosis came alongside menopause, because the hormonal changes can really wreak havoc with the symptoms. And when I look back now, I think that the symptoms of ADHD didn't show up so much as a child, but I know that as I hit puberty, for sure the thing that I remember is the compulsive eating started. And I think that all those changes and the need for the dopamine that I didn't know I needed was showing up in that way. When I was 13, my mom was diagnosed with breast cancer. And she was a warrior. She just kept going. And now I wish she hadn't. I wish that she'd taken the time to heal a bit. But she was managing this household of 4 teenagers and 3 younger ones, very severely disabled daughter. She was teaching full time, and she was going to university to do 2 courses to upgrade. And I just think we didn't know. We just didn't know the degree that she was sick. She didn't really let on, and she died when I was 17. So it was a very, very hard time for all of us. It was devastating for my father, and we leaned on each other, but it also made it really, really hard in the household. So my teenage years, I think in many ways was very much about avoiding how I was feeling and just trying to do more. Because if I do more and I'm busy, I don't have to feel the grief.
The gifts of ADHD are pretty profound. Individuals with ADHD are usually entrepreneurs. They'll engage in high adrenaline type activities, and they'll be thrill seekers. They'll also get a lot of charge out of high stress situations, but they thrive in that environment. It's when their brain is sharpest, when people are challenged or there is a big problem to solve. The other piece of ADHD is the ability to hyper focus. So if somebody finds something interesting and fascinating, they will not stop for food or bathroom breaks or bed. And those are the inventors, those are the chemists and the researchers, looking at cures for things. The ability to really hone in and become an expert in one area is quite a gift. Also, we see a lot of people who have ADHD that are quite famous, people like Justin Timberlake, people who have a real zest for the spotlight and that excitement level, that reactivity to something invigorating. It sparks creativity. So writers, painters, dancers, it's got a lot of pluses.
The Youth Orchestra has been under umbrella for almost 10 years, and I co-conduct it with the amazing Dennis Colpitts. We're a great team, actually. Everything I've ever taught you about subdividing, throw it away in that moment. And just really take your own tempo. See if we can really make that effectively work. In this pandemic year, it's been heartbreaking for me to try and figure out how we can make music this year. I have colleagues across the province that conduct other youth orchestras. We met up on Zoom, of course, to talk about what other people were doing. And I know a lot of the kids in the youth orchestra struggle with their own mental health, and this has been especially hard for that. And music can really help with that. So we came up with this idea. We have 6 youth orchestras across the province, from the island, the lower mainland, and here in the central Okanagan. And we have, I think, collectively 380 kids involved in this project. And we commissioned an amazing composer, Jordan Nobles, in Vancouver, who also is quite a tech master. And he wrote a piece for us very quickly, and each of the kids is recording their own part, and Jordan is stitching them all together, and any proceeds raised will go to youth mental health services throughout the province. It's a very different way of sharing their gifts, but it's giving them a goal and a project that's going to help kids just like them.
Working with Rosemary as a conductor is truly an enlightening experience much of the time, because she's such an experienced and talented musician. She hears music in such a profound way that learning under her, with her, is always, every time we come in, we learn something new about how to interpret music, how to understand music, and how to really enjoy music. Being led by someone that's so open with the group about the challenges that they face in the day-to-day is really inspiring, because I myself live with a physical disability that affects my mobility. And hearing that from a leader that we look up to so much and who has taught us so much just goes to show what I work to teach others throughout my life, which is that regardless of your obstacles, you can reach your maximum potential and inspire others to do the same.
I think having her come forth about her ADHD diagnosis is really inspiring for just anyone who is struggling with that, and anyone with mental illness, honestly, because then people feel like they're not alone, even when sometimes mental illness can make you feel isolated. And I do have my own struggles with it too, mental illness that is, and I think it's really awesome that it's kind of being talked about.
Having somebody else just vocalize their struggle is really comforting and just hits home.
Especially with both of us being part of the LGBTQ community, and Rosemary's made us feel really accepted and welcome here.
ADHD superpowers are not necessarily defined by ADHD, they're defined by the person. So ADHD amplifies everything about the person. So if they're artistic, ADHD is going to magnify that talent, that ability. It plays to the disadvantages as well, right? So everything's 0 or 10 with ADHD. So whatever's natural to that person, whatever their values are, their interests, their natural skill sets, that's their superpower, because ADHD amplifies that for them.
I was absolutely new in the opera role, and when everything shut down, our managing director, Brianna, and our board chair, Alan, we were meeting outside, far apart, to just try and figure out what we could do. We had made all these plans, and none of them could be realized. And foremost in that was, how can we keep getting music into the community? We need it now more than ever. And we thought, you know who is most isolated right now? Our seniors, especially in long-term care facilities. So we came up with a way of singing that was safe from the sidewalk. We ended up calling it Sidewalk Serenades.
My name is Brianna Wells, and I'm the managing director for Opera Kelowna, and I do not have ADHD. It's very, very important for an artistic director to not only create a meaningful artistic program, but also to be very engaged with the community and to inspire the people who live in the place where the art is getting made to be excited about being involved, to feel welcome. This is something that opera kind of historically sometimes grapples with, a bit of a myth about it being elitist or inaccessible, and so those were pieces that Rose brought to the table in spades.
Opera, I have a special heart for it, because not other people do. I'm glad you came down.
I like that. She also works in possibility first. I think some of us, or in different roles, we think about how much time do we have, or what do we need, or who's available, or what can't we do. And she always begins with what's possible, what could happen. And it's amazing to watch her do that.
I know people talk about silver linings, but the silver lining for me in COVID is that I had to go to a deeper place, and I had time to. And I remember thinking, should I really be digging into all of this when when we're all in the middle of a pandemic and I don't have the thing that brings me such joy in my work? But I don't think I had an option. I think that what the pandemic, where it forced us to be in the world, I had to go on that journey. Now I'm starting a year later to honor my strengths and not to take on the things that I know I don't do well, because I am never going to be good at showing up on time, because I have time blindness, because I have ADHD. So I'm putting external strategies around it. I can't tell you how many emails are in my draft folder that are written but didn't get sent. So now I get my assistant, who I hired, to go through my draft folder and find things that aren't sent. And when I told someone that strategy that I was very proud of, they looked at me and said, well, why don't you just hit send? And I said, because I have ADHD. And so I'm not going to try and change that. I'm just going to get someone to help me. And that was huge. I'm going to get someone to help me because I don't do that well. And as I take all the things off my plate, it gives me all this energy to dig into what I do well. And the lift and the self-acceptance that comes from that is so liberating. Now I just need to teach the rest of the world to believe in that. I'm not going to be a neurotypical brain, so love me as I am.
I feel that I'd be a very different person than I am today if I didn't have ADHD. I feel very happy that I can imagine and look at stuff in new angles that other people don't always look at. If I wasn't fidgety, I don't feel like I'd be doing percussion, or wouldn't be doing as big as a job in percussion.
Since I've discovered that Rose has ADHD, or since she discovered it and let me know about it, I think I see some of the ways that she has always acted in a different light now. And I think specifically to the million and one things that she's always doing. And she's very fortunate to be the kind of person that does do well in those circumstances. And I respect the hell out of her for being that way and for doing what she has done.
I wouldn't trade my ADHD for most things in my life. So don't be afraid of going down the exploration of ADHD. I tell people, you know, of all the disorders that we've labeled, ADHD spells itself, so at least it's easy to remember. But it's not a matter of, it's not complex and it's not scary. So wipe the slate clean and pursue it. It's a wonderful life if you let it be.
The more we talk about it, the more we break down the stigma around ADHD, being on the spectrum, and really any kind of mental health. We all have mental health. We sometimes forget that. We all have mental health. Whether we're challenged at this time or whether we're, not challenged. It's all on a spectrum, really.
It's been revelatory to go through this process of releasing the shame that comes with that judgment for all those years. And a lot of that judgment's mine. I know it's been outside world too. I've lost friends for sure. I have amazing friends who, when I say, I just feel like I'm letting people down all the time. One of my best friends says, "You've never let me down." And that, I have to struggle to believe it. So there's a deep joy inside that is mingled with this shame, I think. And I feel finally like I'm just kind of turning a corner in understanding so much about how I've made choices based on things, not knowing that I had ADHD. And, and I've done so much reading and coaching, and it's been really transforming to know, just to have an intellectual understanding of all of this that's going on. Ned Hallowell says two of the greatest things that you can do if you have ADHD is choose the right career and choose the right partner. And I just lucked out on both of those things, because the ADHD gives me gifts as well. And it gives me a gift of creativity and the ability to think in so many different ways that I know that's what makes me good at what I do when I'm on stage. I think deep down I've always had that to hang on to. Now I'm just starting to understand how to lead with that strength and not to try and be different at all the other things that I struggle with, to try and get more help for those things. And I'm starting to see it actually transform my life in such a positive way.
No matter the choice, they all seem wrong. I don't know words to say, so I say them all. I always get in my own way. Whenever I rise, I fall. I fall. I can't stand the thought of sitting still. I'm like the rain on the windowsill. I'm always dancing to music that isn't there. I've learned to enjoy myself and not care when they stop and stare. 'Cause they'll stare, so I pretend that I have taken my time to figure it out. And I have learned enough to know what it's all about. And I have grown to know there's no need to doubt. I know that I can make it. I feel no need to fake it. My time is now. I always start new projects that never get done. Instead of finishing old ones, I start a new one. I love the thought of change and bringing in something new. I get bored easily, I always need something to do. But I make do, 'cause in reality I am taking my time to figure it out. And I am trying my best to know what it's all about. And I'm starting to learn